Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Bruce Larson, and in fact, here I'm going to flip to my next slide here. I'm an independent Epicor consultant. I'm certified. Actually, I just passed there's a test on 600 that I passed. Um, Prior to getting into consulting, I've got 30 years of manufacturing experience, and I've been working with Epicor for 12 years. I focus on the operations and supply chain, but I also dabble and do a lot of work with dashboards and BAQs. And you'll notice I've got MIS up here also because I do work with MIS Consulting and Sales. They're a Epicor Platinum partner. So let's talk about what we're looking at. I did call this cubing, but I don't want to confuse the matter. But we're going to run through really all the data, what groups are, what an executive query is, just for a background, and then also some basics on just how to work with when you are grouping things, how to sum up the data, how to look at the data in a group, and also comparing. There's some different functions in grouping, which you'll see, and then I've got a couple example dashboards, and I will show you an actual live demo of what I've got here too. So you think about your different data tables that are out there. In this view, and what I'm going to be talking about is your sales order table. What were your bookings? And you can see this is an older image, so I've got some old data as far as when I ordered things, but I've got parts and product groups, territories. And you've done this before, or maybe you haven't, but you can do analysis on these where it comes up with, why is it that Dalton is buying more of a product than other customers? And you can find it helps you analyze that information. The same with your territory. Based on a specific territory, what was their trends for sales in the different years? Another is that you can take snapshots of the data and you can look at drilling in here. For instance, that population, 77% of my sales were in the mid states of the U.S. and Mexico was just 1.9. We can get in and drill into that same slice of data and slice it by customers. And now, granted, this is getting a little busy, but again, it's just showing you the capabilities of what you can do. You might look at the product groups. Then finally, this one's very busy, and this would probably be feeding more of a report than a dashboard. As you can see, the small slices in here. Now, I purposely did that just to show you the impact of what works well on a dashboard and what works well on a report. I want to step back, and I've been working with, in fact, Epicor has had a process called an executive query, and some customers have used this, maybe you've used these, but the executive query, it was built up actually in 803, FIST 803, and I've used that. The way it would work is that you would create a BAQ, and then you'd send it over to the executive query where it would do summation. It was a pretty crude tool because all it would do is sum the data. And it was also, you would have to run it, and then it would collect, and you create a query, for instance, saying, I only want to go back 1 year, 2 years. And then you would run this process on a nightly basis to update the cube. On the current menu in Epicor, you'll see customer under the executive analysis. You'll see some dashboards that are currently out there. One on customer shipments, one on supplier delivery. But again, it's a static image. And here you could select, which territory, and this is each one of these was summing up a group of data on what was the quantity or the value and putting it into weekly buckets, for an example. But if we're going to look at the sales order details, like I'd shown you, is there's many different ways to slice into the data. One which I'm sure happens a lot is you give somebody a dashboard that looks like this, they right click, copy to Excel, and then they get out a pivot table and start doing pivot tables. It's effective, but it's not as repeatable as you might like. But what you can do in Epicor is you're able to aggregate the data. And when I'm talking about aggregating the data, when I open up the screen, and this is the calculated fields. You can see on the right-hand side, you've got some functions. You've got averaging, counting, max, min, sum. I also added here standard deviation. You are able to do standard deviation on a formula. One use of that is that you could have a range of jobs, and you can say, what's the standard deviation on actual runtime or actual labor hours against an operation? And you can find out, is that in control or not? That's how I would see using standard deviation. But if you're used to looking at creating formulas, like here, extended revenue. So if I go onto the order detail table, take the unit price, multiply it by the order quantity, I'm going to get the extended revenue for that line. But if I want to sum it up when I'm working with groups, I actually take this sum and I just place that as the function around the formula that I've created. And you can do a lot of things inside of these formulas. I don't have a picture to show you, but I've also done things where I might have done a case statement. So if I want to see 3 columns, one for 2019, 2020, and 2021, I could have an if statement. So if the order date is in 2019, then it's going to show up as extended revenue for 2019. And then you can do the same thing for the next column over. So we can do some group buys. Now many are using this, and I'll admit I've been using this group buy capability for a long time. It was right there. And in fact, you saw where I had a extended quantity or the extended revenue. So I'm saying for every unique row, so here I've got the customer ID, the territory ID, the product group, part, and the part. It's going to group by that and then sum those up together. To just show you a more simple one is, here I took that and just got it down to territory only. So here I'm going to say for every territory, give me the sum of this data. And so when I run the query, this is what I end up with. So those are the summations, and here it's the number of orders that I happen to have in the system that it was totaling up. So this advanced group buy, you've got some opportunities here, and we'll see this a few times, but you've got one that's called a roll up. And what it's doing with the roll up is I can look at, in fact, probably the better one to look at is down here in the US mid market. I'm looking at the total. I get a total for the territory. I also got a territory for the territory and customer, and then territory, customer, and product group, and then take it one more step and for the parts. So if you look at the fabricated ones here I've got 3 for the product group, and then for each one of these, I have a quantity of 1. And so it's called a roll-up. So it's not giving you all possible combinations. It's just taking and going across. Now another one which actually I'm using, and I'm going to show you a dashboard for bookings that I've put together. This one is really powerful because in one query, you're able to do this. In fact, you don't even have to do subqueries, where before you would have to do something with a lot of unions. The grouping sets, I've said group it on territory, group it on customer ID, product group, and part. And so in each one of these, it's going in and doing the groupings. If you did the math really quick, you could add up all of these and you would see that they add up to the same thing that all of the product groups come in. The last one is the cube. Now the cube, this is where it's going to take all of the possible combinations of the fields that you've selected and puts it together. In fact, I'll show it again. You'll see the screen again, but here I had 1,400 rows. Here I have, for the grouping sets, I had 151 rows, and the roll-ups I had 258 rows. So it will bring back the different amounts. So you're probably going to ask, how in the world do I do this? And when you go into the BAQ, and I've done this, you probably have done this too, instead of hitting the calculator, you come down here and hit this thing that looks like the calculator also, and this screen pops up and you say, what in the world is this? And then you just close the red X and pop it back and you go to your calculation for your fields. But what this is really is that it is similar to the calculated fields, because you can do calculated fields in these groupings. But the key thing here is this top one where it's the group by. How am I going to group this data? I can do the roll up, the cube, or the grouping sets. The formula that you would be doing for the roll up, for an example, here I'm saying do it by the territory, then customer and customer name, product group, description, and actually in the picture then is going to, your query is going to return this information, grouping it like this. In the grouping sets, when you're looking at the grouping sets, again, you can see it's saying, just give me the territory or the ID. And I put parentheses around here where I'm putting the customer and the customer name together as one group. And then the last one is your queue, where you're getting all possible combinations. Now, what can you do with these cubes? In fact, I'm going to switch over to Epicor, and Calvin or Fred, you can see Epicor now?
Yes, I can see a bookings dashboard.
Perfect. Okay. So what this dashboard is doing is, back, when I was talking about the executive query, when you'd run it, you would have to run it, and it was a static set of data. But in this one, and this has been changed, I've got 3 queries here, 3 BAQs on this dashboard. And when I'm running these different queries, the problem is that if I use a parameter, I would get prompted 3 times for my date ranges. Well, I put an updatable dashboard in here with a date filter, so I can come in here, change this to, let's just go in and I'll put this in at 2014, save this, and then I can just hit my refresh all button. And now it's just it's going through and refreshing all of the views in here, and it's only bringing back the data set that I asked for. So it does react fairly quickly. And then I'm able to come in here and select my different things. And you'll see that as I'm selecting the different group type, this is updating to those summaries, giving me a pie chart. And then also down below, it's giving you details on what's the revenue by week for the different products. And if I were to switch this over to territory, now I have this screen, it's updated this, and now it's updated also my information down here for the US MAT territory, or here's the Northeast territory. And I was able to, the only way that I was able to make this fairly easily, and this is not with a lot of heavy, there's no codes in here. I didn't have to write any C#. I don't even know C#. But this is what you're able to do with this query. I want to go over and give you the, we're going to walk through a query so you can see how it gets built out. Now, if I take my basic query, so I've got the order detail, and I've joined it to the customer, product group, the part. I've got my order head, excuse me. And so the first thing I want to do is, after I've selected my fields that I want to get details on, I come in here and I want to do my calculated field. So here I've got extended quantity, revenue, I could do order count, I'm doing average revenue. Then in fact, just to walk through how I can create that again. So I'm just going to get rid of this one. And because I'm really lazy when it comes to, because I'm using the same formula here, I can just come in here, actions, duplicate field. And let's just call this average extended revenue without the J. I can get rid of that. And then I can come over to the aggregate and just double click on that and then delete the extra parentheses. So I grabbed the wrong one. So I've got average order quantity. Oh, you know what? I wasn't watching which screen I was on. Let's fix this one. So come back here, delete that, double click, and delete that. So now when I run this, it's going to come back and give me this information. Okay, so that works out pretty good, but again, the problem that I have, it's taking and combining all of these together, but I just want to see what's going on with Mexico. I want to see the separate groupings. So let's come in here and I'm going to ungroup all of these. I'm going to come down and launch the advanced group by. So let's talk a little bit about this screen. One thing, you'll come in here and if you start typing, and I've done this where I've come in here and I said I want to do a grouping set, And I go data, the database fields, and I can come in here and hit comma. And then I just say, okay, so I close this. I didn't save anything because I didn't say add a new record. So that's a tip. I've done this several times where I've gone in and had this really nice formula, but I lost it. So again, let's do a grouping set. This is probably the first one that I'd almost recommend that you may want to look at. And I'm going to open up the list of available fields to group by. So let's group by the territory. Now I've got customer ID and name. Well, I don't want to have a group of customer ID and customer name. I want to put those together. So let's just put a parentheses in here. Comma, name, right parentheses, comma, product group, comma, and same thing with the part, comma, and then right parentheses. And sometimes to see how it actually is broken out, you can come in here. And the other thing is that if you wanted to, you can also add a comment in here, comment. This is how well, you can put in a comment that doesn't affect the code, but it helps explain why did you do what you did. So you can say, okay. Now, something you're going to notice is that the group by column now is all grayed out. You can't group by anything. If I come in back here and analyze, I can do a quick test. And now it's grouping. First, it does one group, which is this totals everything. So here's your master total or the grand total. But here's by the part. And as I scroll down, by the product group, by the customer ID and name, and then by the territory. So it's done totals on each one of those for you. Any questions at all on that?
So far, you don't have any questions yet.
Okay, thanks, Fred.
Bruce, this is John. The tracker portion you're showing with the date range, you said that was an updatable dashboard. Why?
Yeah.
Why an updatable dashboard instead of a tracker?
The reason for, and honestly, I'll even ask Fred or Calvin or anyone to correct me on this, but by doing the updatable dashboard, in fact, in this query that we're looking at right now is I've got UD11. So UD11 is just a user defined table that I've selected, and I'm filtering it based on the current user ID.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing that is for every user, I'm allowing a user to create a separate row, and that's going to show store. In fact, now let's go back over to this query, and I'm going to go into this subquery criteria. So I'm looking at order head, order date is greater than or equal to the UD date 1 and date 2 field. And so what that does is when you run the query, it only brings back the data for that date range. if you do a tracker view, the tracker view brings back, it can bring back the world, all of the rows, and then it's filtering at that point. That way this runs a little bit more efficiently.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why I was doing it that way. That's why I was bringing back just so this. I'm using this. I've been using this now for the past couple of years on different queries, especially if I just go back to that bookings one. On this bookings one, each one of these, so if I look at this, and this, those are 3 different BAQs on what they're returning.
Okay.
But this one up in the upper left-hand corner is that updatable. It's an updatable BAQ, and this is a deployed or assembled dashboard. And this has been enabled to allow me to create the date record so that it is stored for me. So it's worked out fairly well for me.
Okay, then the other 3 BAQs use the UD11 table to filter down the dates selected in that range, correct?
Exactly, just like this, and you'll note that I'm saying all values of this subquery, which is my date. I'm calling it date filter just to keep track of what it is. But the catch is with that subquery, when I'm looking at it, I've set it so that it's based on the current user ID. So it's only this subquery only returns 1 record.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so
That's a neat little way of doing that.
yeah, it's and actually, I was struggling with how do you do this. And if you do this with parameters, you get prompted 3 times, and then each time you refresh, you get prompted 3 times if
Right.
you've got BAQs out there on parameters, because you can't, unless somebody knows how to do this, you can't share a parameter from one BAQ to another BAQ.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so in fact, the next thing I'll show you on here is that now what I do like about this advanced grouping 2 is that I can come in here and instead of doing a grouping set, I just want to take a look at the roll-up. I can come in here, add the roll-up. Come back here to the analysis, and now it's doing the roll-up. And again, it's not based on the sequence that I have these columns, because I can come in here and modify this. In fact, here I'm going to just expand this so you can see a little bit better. Let's say I wanted to change this to a customer. So now I'm doing customer first, territory. And so now it's doing the customer. And so really, if I sort this on customer, it might be a little bit clearer, but it's doing customer, then territory, then the other items to the left of it. In fact, if I did this, it might help with seeing how it's working. So here I've got the total for this customer. And then as it's rolling up, now in this case, because this customer is only in 1 territory, these 2 numbers are going to be the same. And then the last way that, again, that I could do this change this to cube, or I can even, you know, if you can just come in here and type in cube. Analyze, test. And now what we're seeing is, again, brought back 1,000 rows, and it's all of the different, you know, we can check it out. In fact, I did a spreadsheet where I was trying to compare the different sheets between each other, but this one gives all possible combinations. And again, with those different, I'm going to just show you side by side the same information. So here's those different ones: the roll up, the grouping set, and the cube. So again, I can, based on my date range, I'm actually updating all of these. And down below, I was just looking at booking details and how I could sort this out. In fact, I'm gonna next show you what I'm doing with these detailed records, because I did have to do a little bit of a trick on setting up that dashboard. But here's a roll up and the group sets and the cube with all of the different data. So the next thing I'm going to show you is actually how this was built, because again, there was some details behind the scenes that I had to do. So let's go back into the query. Let's clear that. I'll put in a quick search, because I always, if I'm working on a dashboard, I want to pull in all my queries for that one dashboard. So here's my, so I want to pull in these. In fact, just back to John's question about the date filter. So here's the date filter BAQ, which is updatable. I'm returning all of the date fields in order to make it updatable. Almost bringing back key 2, 3, 4, 5, key 1 and 2. And I'm sharing you all my secrets here. So here I've set it so that when I do an update on a new record, it grabs the constant of the current user ID and just pastes it in. So I don't really, because you never can rely on users to type in their username correctly. I'd rather just do it for them in the background. Now, if I go over to booking types, so that's just going to flip back and forth. So we're looking at this one here, booking types. Let's go into here. And I'm doing grouping by sets. So I'm showing by the customer name, the territory, so the different information. And then my calculation. So I'm doing quantity, revenue, and line count. And I've come in here and I'm saying show it by the different grouping types. And I did this with a top level query. That's because I just wanted to show the calculated group types. So this is one of the magic things that I'm doing. So this is because I'm looking at the results of the data. In fact, I'll show you, but here's this calculated field. So I'm looking at if the part number is null, is not null, so the word not, put in the word part, otherwise product group, otherwise territory or customer, or total. If I come back here and I run this query, it's showing this information. This is what I want displayed on the screen, but if I come back here, so you can see what that other query returns. So let's just change that. Change this to top level. So the calculated field on what type of field row it is not getting calculated here. But again, I'm looking for, if this is not null, over here, I put another column, which is the type, and it says, oh, it's part. So let's put this back to the way it was. So again, so when I run this, it's just bringing back, it's grouping it based on the group type, which I don't believe I am doing this advanced grouping based on group type. Now, it's probably, I'm overusing this. I probably could have just checked this box too. But if you got a hammer, everything's a nail. So now let's take a look at the grouping sets. Now this is very similar to that query that we had before. So I start out with my date filter, and then I pull in the details. And I've got my displays that I'm bringing in. And I'm doing my group sets. But again, this is where you want to do something like this to make it more usable. So here I'm doing, what is the group? And the group, this term, again, this is an undocumented function. So it doesn't show up in any of these functions here. This is a SQL term. Thank you, Fred, to tell me go learn SQL. So I went out and found this term coalesce, and what coalesce does is that when you have so here I've got a list of calculations that it finds the first one that is not null as it's working through it. And then for the group type, I'm doing the same type of thing that I did with the other one, saying it's a part, the product group, territory. And then I also have this lookup, and the lookup is doing the same thing, but it's giving me back the part number for that grouping. So when I run this, I'm getting all of this, and you can see here's my lookup, but the group type. So now I can filter this by part, product group, territory, or customer. But when I select one of these, I'm always pointing to this same lookup table for a subscribe or for a publish. So I'm publishing this lookup. And so the last one that I did here is booking details. Again, using my filter, same set of data, but we're doing something a little bit different here. I'm not doing any grouping. And I also have calculated revenues. And because I'm looking at it just one line at a time, it's just pulling in the data. So here's my order quantity, extended revenue, etc. And again, just so you can, before I move on to the next part of it, that's where it's showing. So when I pick a customer here and I pick Boeing here, and I'm getting this list of the details inside of the inside of that group. But you're seeing what's happening is each time I change this to a to a different type, and I pick hardware. Now down at the bottom, I'm seeing a list of detailed information that's all based on hardware. And what it's doing in the background, it's actually looking at that calculated field, which, let's take a look at my details here. So I have a product group where I'm doing top level. So I'm grabbing the details. And I'm doing that calculation. So here I just say product group. In fact, I tried to do the case statement and it didn't work. So I just have this as a comment down below here, just as so I made sure that I had the right spelling and spacing. And then again, for the lookup, it's just saying what was the description of the product group. The next query that I did here, so I'm doing something called a union all. And what the union all is, it's taking the same list of columns and stacking them one on top of the other. So when I run this query, you're going to see that it brought back 644 rows. Well, that's actually, I believe it's 4 times or something the amount of rows, because it is repeating. But the key thing here is if you look over here to the right, the type of field and the lookup is changing. And then finally, to put this all together, and probably it's better if I just go over to the dashboard. Do this quick. And I won't go into into all the details because I want to show you one last thing too, is that you'll see that when I'm in the type, I'm publishing a value. And then when I get over here to this level, I'm subscribing to a value, but I'm also publishing a value. And when I get down here, I'm subscribing to a value. So this screen is saying, I want to look at territories. This one says, okay, I'll show you territories. Then this one, when I say I want to look at Mexico, it publishes Mexico, and it filters this screen, the detail one down below, showing me all the parts. The last part that I'm going to jump into, besides looking at this dashboard, is what else can you do with this capability? If you haven't learned BAQ reports yet, and if you're comfortable with BAQs, I'm going to recommend look at BAQ reports. I just picked it up a few weeks ago and started working with it. So this is it's pretty rudimentary, but what I wanted to show you is the ability to, with one view from a query, this is a different set of data now. So this is looking at basically it's a commissions report. So here I'm showing a salesperson and what was his total sales for the time period that I've chosen. Again, I'm using that same type of date filter. What was the gross margin and what was the split based on the rep split? But because of how I wrote it, I can go to the next page and now I'm totaling it by the customer. And now I'm showing the details by invoice. And I did this again by using that grouping sets and using filters in the BAQ report to show different types. And this is all with one view. It's not with sub-reports inside of the BAQ report. And so all of the totaling and everything else is done back at the query, not inside of the BAQ report. So I know I just covered quite a bit for you. Let's run through this. This is just another one that I wrote. This is an earlier one because here I'm showing the user ID and name, which I've hit it on. This is allowing me to see on-time deliveries by supplier. And here I'm showing it by month and by year, and I'm showing some trends. So what questions do you have?
So far, we've got some feedback from Simon that UD11 is a great way to get around not passing parameters.
Okay.
Any other questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. Or not the chat, I'm sorry, the Q&A area. This was really good, Bruce. It's a good way to get around having to generate that cube on a nightly basis. You can see your data as it's changing.
Oh, that's what it has worked well, you know. Again, if I come back here, and in fact, since we've got just a little bit of time, let me just jump over here. And if I come into here it is, UD11. So I actually put UD11, and this is more for development reasons. But just so you can see how this kind of works is I'm going to delete this record. I'm going to come back to my dashboard and do a refresh all. And it's it has nothing to, there's no filter here. And normally I even put a note saying, if this is gray, click new record. So now let's just go back. And then let's just put today's date in. Okay, and one of the things that you have to do, now that I've updated this, I need to click save, and then I hit refresh all. And so now that's just done that. And if I go back over to UD11, so I can do a search. And here's my record. And if I go to the list view, and I've personalized this so it just brings the date fields right up in front here. But you can see here's my date fields. So that's basically what it's doing. And I haven't done it yet, but using this same concept, you could see where you could put in different fields in here, like departments. In fact, you could even have, if you didn't have CRM, but you wanted to limit which territories a person could see, you could use this as a different way of filtering that out when they're looking at a certain query. So it's endless, because with the UD field, you've got checkboxes and you've got character fields and number fields.
All right, and we've got a comment from John Myers. Could you go over all this again? He's just,
Well,
Now, John, this was recorded, so this will be put out. So yes, Bruce can go over it many times for you in video.
or if you have questions, here's my email, or you can go to my webpage, larsonsolutions.com. Happy to answer a question on what you're trying to do. Because of the amount of work that I put into that that bookings dashboard, I'm not going to put that out on the user site as much as you might like that, but I spent a lot of time crafting that.
yeah, that's not a small project. Feedback from Greg Baker. Thank you very much. Very informative. A lot of info, and glad that it's recorded so we can go back and catch it all.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
just one thing from Elaine Silva. How quickly can this be available? And I'm assuming you're meaning the recording, not the dashboards, because the dashboards basically how fast you can put those together, and the queries would be how fast those can be available. The recording, once we get it done, we're going to break it apart into the individual sessions and then post it out on YouTube. So I would say at least a week, just because the people that are doing the breaking out of that video are also doing some consulting work. So it kind of depends on their schedules, but we'll get it out as quickly as we can.
Elaine, it may take a couple weeks. He was hit by the tornado over in the Lombard area, so he's without power, and we don't know when he's going to have it back. So it may take a little longer since the video editor is kind of out for about a week, but we'll definitely put that out there. Bruce, would you be able to send any of the sample dashboards with your presentation? We can send those out with the minutes of the meeting. Any that you're willing to share, we can go ahead and attach to the people.
What I could do is I'll take one query. I'll take one of the queries and just where it's a group where I'm doing that advanced grouping, just so you can see it. And I'll probably just do it against the bookings dashboard. Then I'm going to take off the UD11 filter, and I'll even replace it with the parameters, so you can run it and kind of see how it works for you. So you can say, I want to see bookings between December and March, and it would run for you, at least so you can get a feel for what does a grouping set do for you.
Appreciate that, Bruce.
And the only thing I would add for you, Bruce, is if you added to the UD11 to those key fields, what dashboard the data tied to, you could then utilize the UD11 for multiple dashboards and only have one table occupied or share one piece of that table.
Oh,
so
yeah,
that might be something food for thought for you.
No, actually, that's what I am doing, is that UD11 is sort of my central date filter. Now, maybe I should have picked UD30 instead, but I started with UD11 and so be it. But I'm using that for a supplier on-time delivery dashboard. I'm using it for a received not invoiced dashboard, which is real time. So I can take a look at what was my received not invoiced as of July 31st or June 30th. And I can do that even though invoices have come in. So that's something that in Epicor, you can't run that report actively, but I'm using that as a filter, UD11. And I might pick date 3 and 4 for the supplier and date 5 for the received not invoiced, so that you don't have that overlap.
Any other questions or feedback for Bruce?
Okay, well, hey, thank you for the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on how to do queries, and yeah, I'd love to talk to you if you want to reach out on the Epicor user site or on my email. Happy to do that. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bruce.